Elisabeth Báthory, often called the Blood Countess, is a name whispered in infamy and surrounded by tales of unspeakable horrors. On a frigid night in the early 17th century, Székely Castle loomed over the hills of Hungary, its towering stone walls casting ominous shadows on the forests below. Inside its darkened chambers, Elizabeth paced slowly, her crimson gown trailing over the cold stone floors. Her dark eyes, sharp with an almost unnatural intensity, surveyed the hall that had become the heart of a horrifying mystery, a secret fortress of terror and obsession. Born in 1560, Elizabeth was privileged, powerful, and intelligent. A member of one of Hungary's most influential families, she enjoyed an education rare for women of her time, learning Latin, German, Greek, and etiquette. At 15, she married Ferenc Nadasdy, a famed warrior and nobleman, solidifying her social and political power. The marriage was a prosperous union, and when Ferenc was often away at war, Elizabeth managed their extensive estates with a strict and decisive hand. But solitude would ultimately shape Elizabeth's life in ways no one could have anticipated, and her once celebrated intelligence would be clouded by a dark, twisted fixation. As Elizabeth grew older, she became obsessed with her own beauty and youth, fearing the relentless march of time. Tales began to circulate that she sought more than simple remedies to preserve her youthful glow, dabbling instead in arcane rituals rumored to hold the key to eternal beauty. Her vanity grew, and it soon morphed into a disturbing compulsion. Within Székely Castle, servants began to fear her watchful gaze and sharp tongue, sensing that her appetite for control was now accompanied by something far more sinister. At first, her servants noticed her increasing severity, her anger flaring over the smallest infractions. Her punishments grew harsher, more violent. A slap or whipping was replaced by cruel and prolonged suffering. But soon these acts of cruelty seemed to extend beyond discipline, turning into dark rituals that filled the castle's halls with whispers of terror. Servants began to go missing, their disappearances explained away with cold efficiency. Young girls from the nearby villages, drawn to the promise of work and wages, arrived at Székely Castle, never to be seen again. Elizabeth's strange behavior remained hidden from the outside world for years, cloaked in the secrecy of her rank and power. Her castle became a place of fear for those who lived within it, a fortress where Elizabeth ruled as both lady and executioner. She was rumored to have surrounded herself with a small, devoted group of female attendants who helped carry out her chilling orders, women whose loyalty seemed bound by both fear and fascination. Together they carried out Elizabeth's dark rituals, transforming the castle's dim corridors and chambers into scenes of unspeakable horror. The rumors about Elizabeth's deeds grew darker with each passing year. It was said that she had come to believe the blood of young girls could rejuvenate her, restoring her skin and preserving her youth. Her vanity, it seemed, had driven her to madness, a descent so steep that her actions defied understanding. Tales of her cruelty painted her as more than a tyrant. She was now seen as a demon in human form, a woman driven by a perverse desire that could not be sated. Witnesses would later testify that Elizabeth had subjected hundreds of girls to unimaginable torment. Estimates suggest that she may have killed more than 600 young women, though exact numbers remain uncertain. What is known is that the scale of her atrocities was unprecedented, an unending horror that cast a dark shadow over her name and family. Elizabeth's methods were reportedly as varied as they were brutal, designed to extract fear, suffering, and, she believed, the essence of youth. Villagers grew suspicious as young girls continued to disappear, the promise of work at the castle tarnished by the stench of death that seemed to linger around it. Mothers hid their daughters whenever Elizabeth's attendants came to recruit workers, and the few who escaped Székely Castle's walls spoke of horrors that defied comprehension. They described rooms filled with bloodstains, crude instruments of torture, and Elizabeth herself, coldly supervising the suffering she inflicted. When her reputation finally reached the ears of King Matthias II, he could no longer ignore the murmurings of unrest. In 1610, he ordered an investigation, sending Count György Thurzó, a relative of Elizabeth and one of Hungary's highest-ranking nobles, to confront her. Thurzó arrived at Chait Castle with a retinue of soldiers, expecting resistance, but nothing could have prepared him for the scene that awaited inside. As they entered the castle, Thurzó and his men were met with the stench of death. They found blood-smeared walls, rooms littered with bodies in various stages of decay, and survivors bearing scars too horrible to imagine. The Countess's chambers were fitted with instruments of torture, relics of her gruesome experiments. Those who had survived her cruelty were discovered emaciated, broken, their eyes wide with horror. Thurzó's men described finding one girl chained, barely alive, and another lying motionless in a pool of blood. Elisabeth herself remained defiant as she was arrested, her face cold and expressionless. She did not beg for mercy or attempt to flee, simply held the gaze of her captors with a strange calm. It was as if she had expected this moment, and perhaps she had, knowing that her crimes could not remain hidden forever. Her arrest shocked Hungary, for Elisabeth Báthory was not only a noblewoman, but a member of one of the nation's most powerful families. Her wealth, beauty, and intellect had once commanded admiration. Now, she was known only as the Blood Countess. Witnesses came forward to testify against her, recounting tales of cruelty that seemed impossible to believe. Servants described Elizabeth's obsession with youth, her belief that by bathing in the blood of young girls, she could capture their beauty and vitality. Many spoke of the way she seemed to relish the pain she inflicted, treating suffering as a pathway to her twisted pursuit of eternal youth. The scale of her crimes, according to testimony, was staggering, with estimates of over 600 girls falling victim to her madness. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Elizabeth was spared a public trial, shielded by her noble blood. The authorities feared the scandal would destabilize the aristocracy, so her punishment was quiet but severe. She was to be confined within her own castle, bricked up in a set of rooms with only narrow slits for air and food. Her fortress of terror had now become her prison, the walls that once protected her now serving to isolate her from the world she had terrorized. There, alone in the shadows, Elizabeth faced the solitude that had driven her down this dark path, condemned to spend her final years cut off from the life she had once commanded. Elisabeth Báthory died in 1614, her name forever stained by the crimes that earned her a place among history's most infamous figures. Her legacy persisted, her memory haunting the Hungarian countryside like a dark shadow. Villagers whispered that her spirit roamed Chait Castle at night, laughing in the dark, her beauty forever frozen in death. Even centuries later, Elisabeth Báthory remains a figure of horror, her story told and retold, her name synonymous with cruelty. Her obsession with youth, the madness that drove her to kill, serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the depths of human depravity.